The golden sun spilled softly across the African savanna, painting the tall grass in warm hues as the wind whispered through blades sharp as knives. It was the kind of morning that seemed peaceful, too peaceful, but beneath that quiet lay the scent of blood and the tension of something ancient stirring. A lone male lion stalked the dry earth, his mane swaying like fire in the wind. Hunger burned in his belly, his amber eyes locked onto a limping antelope near a shallow watering hole, an easy kill. He crouched low, breath held, muscles coiled like a spring. Then, snap! The ground beneath him shifted. A snare, hidden beneath the dust, clenched around his paw like iron jaws. Pain shot through his leg. The lion roared, a deep guttural cry that echoed across the empty plain, but no herd came, no pride, no help, except from one man. Elias, a quiet, aging ranger, heard that roar. He came without a weapon, only a length of rope and a fire in his chest. Despite being slashed by panicked claws, he freed the beast, then turned and walked away. The lion never forgot him, and fate was only just beginning to stir. 1 year passed. The savannah hadn't changed. The wind still carried dust and silence, and the sun still rose like fire behind the acacia trees. But something had shifted. The forest was still quiet, but men were not. Deep in the eastern corridor of the reserve, tire tracks carved unnatural path through the underbrush. Spent cartridges littered the dirt like forgotten secrets. Rangers whispered about shadows moving at night. Cameras went dark without reason. And then Elias found the snare. It wasn't a relic of old poaching days. It was new, clean, set with surgical precision. He followed the signs, his weathered boots silent on the dry ground, his instincts sharper than ever. What he found confirmed his fears. A new group of poachers had breached the reserve. And they weren't just after animals this time. They were after the man who could expose them. By dusk, the forest fell into uneasy stillness. Elias returned to his watch station, a small wooden outpost nestled beneath the canopy. He lit the lantern, made tea, wrote in his logbook. That's when the first shot rang out. Glass shattered, wood splintered. The lantern crashed to the floor in a burst of flame and oil. Elias dove to the ground, grabbing only his emergency satchel and radio before vaulting out the back. A second shot tore through the trees. Then shouting, angry, purposeful, human voices. They weren't hunting. They were coming to silence him. Elias ran. Branches tore at his sleeves. Thorns bit into his skin. A bullet grazed his shoulder. Hot pain flared, blood seeping into his shirt. But he didn't stop. Not yet. He knew these trails better than any map. He twisted through the brush, leapt over a gully, and ducked beneath a fallen log. His lungs burned. His pulse roared in his ears. But even as his legs faltered, a single thought kept him upright. Get to the ridge! Signal the tower. And just as he crested the path, a third shot rang out, closer now. He stumbled, knees hitting the dirt. Somewhere behind him, bootsteps closed in, methodical and confident. But just as darkness began to pull at the edges of his vision, something moved in the tree line, something massive, low, silent. A sound rose in the night, not a shout, not a gunshot, a growl, deep, ancient, familiar. And Elias froze, his hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder, his breath caught in his chest, because he knew that sound. And the men with guns, they were not alone anymore. Elias crouched in the dirt, blood soaking through the fabric of his sleeve, heart pounding like a war drum against his ribs. The footsteps were closing in now, crunching leaves, snapping twigs, accompanied by the cold click of a rifle chamber being readied. He had minutes left, maybe less. His vision blurred at the edges, the forest spinning around him in dizzying circles of shadow and sound. The last thing he saw before his knees buckled fully to the earth was the glint of a flashlight sweeping toward him, and then the world shattered. A roar, raw and thunderous, tore through the trees like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't a sound born of fear or warning. It was a declaration of territory, of wrath, of something far more ancient than gunpowder. The forest went still. Even the wind stopped. From the thickets beside the ridge, a shape exploded forward, massive, fluid, and terrifying in its grace. A lion. Not just any lion, the same lion, the one Elias had freed from the hunter's snare 1 year before. Now the beast stood taller, stronger, its mane wild and golden, its eyes burning like molten amber in the moonlight. Its teeth bared with a low-rising growl that seemed to shake the roots of the earth. The poachers froze. For a heartbeat, none dared move. Then one, braver or more foolish than the rest, raised his rifle, finger sliding toward the trigger, but he never got the chance. The lion lunged. The impact was thunderous, man and rifle flying backward into the underbrush, the gun discharged uselessly into the air. A scream followed, short and broken. Another man turned to run, but tripped on a tree root, scrambling backwards in panic as the lion circled, muscles rippling, fangs bared. Elias, still slumped against the base of a tree, could hardly believe what he was seeing. His mind reeled, not from blood loss, but from a truth too profound to explain. This lion wasn't here by chance. It had followed his scent, his voice, his pain. It had come for him. A third poacher shouted, waving a blade, but hesitated, his hand trembling. And the lion, standing like a statue of wrath and judgment, held his gaze. Then, slowly, it took one step forward, then another. The man dropped his knife and fled into the dark. The jungle swallowed him whole. And in that silence that followed, Elias breathed again. Not because the danger had passed, but because he knew now, without a doubt, the bond they once shared had never broken. Not by time, not by distance, not even by blood. The jungle erupted into chaos. Gunfire cracked like thunder through the trees. Leaves exploded in every direction as boots slammed against wet earth, and wild cries pierced the night. The poachers, now panicked, scattered like startled crows. But the lion, he didn't flinch. He moved with purpose. Elias crawled behind a thick fig tree, clutching his wounded shoulder, breath shallow, heart thudding, not just from pain, but awe. In front of him, no longer a beast of the wild, the lion now moved like a guardian unleashed. The man he had tackled lay groaning in the underbrush, ribs shattered from the impact. Another had vanished, his shouts fading into the dark like a ghost swallowed by the wild. But there was one more, the last one, the one Elias hadn't seen yet. Behind the ranger, a shadow moved, silent, calculated. A poacher with a blade gripped tight in a gloved fist, creeping step by step through the ferns. His eyes were locked on Elias, his breath slow and steady. He knew the lion was distracted. This was his chance. But the lion knew too. Even as his ears flicked toward the rustle of ferns, he turned, fast, instinctive. In a flash of muscle and fury, he leapt, twisting mid-air, body crashing between Elias and the blade. The knife never touched skin. It clattered to the ground, skidding against rock and root. The poacher stumbled back, arms raised in panic. But the lion didn't strike. He stood there, a wall of snarling muscle, his body shielding the man who once unshackled him. Time seemed to stop. Elias stared, stunned, the image seared into his memory. A wounded ranger, a hunter trembling in fear, and a lion, not killing, but choosing to protect. The poacher turned and ran, crashing through the jungle like a wild animal himself. The night swallowed him too. Now only silence remained, broken only by the soft rustle of wind through leaves and the steady sound of Elias's breathing as he slid down the tree and sat against its base, hands trembling. The lion turned toward him. Their eyes met, man and beast, and something passed between them. Not words, not even memory, just a truth. They were no longer predator and prey. They were something else entirely. And as the moonlight bathed the clearing in silver, Elias whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "You came back, didn't you?" The clearing lay still, steeped in the scent of smoke, blood, and earth. Above, the stars blinked through the canopy like silent witnesses to what had just unfolded. Elias remained seated against the tree, his breath slowing now, his body trembling from both the wound and the weight of what he had just seen. Then, headlights cut through the trees, the sharp crackle of radios, the stomp of boots on broken branches. The patrol team had arrived, finally. Uniformed rangers emerged from the darkness, rifles raised, scanning for threats. They weren't expecting what they found. 3 poachers, subdued and weaponless, bound by their own belts. 2 lay groaning in the dirt. 1 had been caught running and cuffed at the river bend. And there, beside the wounded ranger, a lion, standing still, breathing slow, bleeding from a shallow graze across his flank, but utterly calm. The rangers hesitated, unsure whether to aim or approach, but Elias raised a weak hand and shook his head. "He's not the danger," he said hoarsely. "He's the reason I'm still alive." They lowered their guns. The lion looked at them for only a moment, then returned his gaze to Elias. He stood just a few paces away now, his mane rippling softly in the breeze, eyes lit not with rage, but something far older, something deeper. He didn't blink, didn't growl, just watched. Elias managed a faint smile through cracked lips and whispered, "I'm okay, my friend. You can go now." There was a pause. A moment stretched long and weighty, and then the lion turned. One paw at a time, he stepped back into the shadows. No roar, no rush, just a quiet, deliberate retreat into the forest that birthed him. Within seconds, the dark swallowed his silhouette whole. It was as if he had never been there, but Elias knew better. He had been, and he had chosen not to flee, not to kill, but to stand, to protect, to repay. And as the ranger was lifted onto a stretcher, eyes fluttering from exhaustion, he whispered one last thought to himself, words meant for no one else but the night. That wasn't instinct. That was gratitude. And though the forest fell silent once more, Elias could still feel the weight of those golden eyes, watching from somewhere beyond the trees. In the weeks that followed, the forest returned to silence, but the world beyond it did not. News of the ambush and the lion's impossible intervention spread like wildfire. Footage from patrol cameras, fragmented but real, showed flashes of the beast guarding Elias, fangs bared, eyes burning in the dark. At a press conference, a young reporter asked the question everyone was thinking. "Why didn't you run, Elias? Why did you trust that lion wouldn't attack you?" The old ranger smiled, lines deep with memory. "Because I was the first one who believed he wasn't meant to die." Soon after, the sanctuary expanded. A new surveillance tower rose, bearing a bronze statue near its base, a lion and a man standing side by side, eyes turned to the horizon. Online, their story became more than just viral. It became a reminder. When you meet nature with cruelty, it remembers. But when you meet it with compassion, it remembers more. Because sometimes, between instinct and savagery, the only thing that keeps a life breathing is the one hand that dared to set it free. And somewhere, deep within the trees, a lion still watches and remembers.